Imagine you're navigating a massive ship through this really treacherous rocky channel at night.
Right, zero visibility.
Exactly. And you have complete faith in your instruments, your
Yeah.
GPS, the compass, the depth sounder.
All the stuff built by experts to keep you alive.
Yeah, exactly. The system's designed specifically to keep you from crashing.
Yeah.
But then, as the water gets choppy, you look down and you realize the compass is just spinning wildly.
Oh, man.
And the GPS is actively routing you directly toward a reef.
That's terrifying.
Right. And to make it worse, the crew is just standing around arguing about whether the ship even exists.
Wow. Yeah, that's a perfect analogy for what we're looking at today.
It really is. Welcome to the Morning Roundup, everyone. This is our deep dive, and today we are tackling a massive stack of sources the producers provided to us.
And they're intense, like seemingly totally disconnected areas of modern life.
Yeah, we're going from, shocking political reports out of the UK detailing systemic corruption to sociological analyses of the education system in Australia.
And then we're jumping into, theological debates happening on live stream panels.
Right, and unpacking tech world critiques on artificial intelligence.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. But our mission today for this deep dive is to trace the single thread connecting all these documents. And that thread is institutional betrayal.
Yeah, and specifically, how people are searching for authentic foundations when all their legacy systems just totally fail them.
Because when the navigational instruments of a society fail, the psychological toll on the public is just immense.
Oh, absolutely. And the sources we're analyzing today, they suggest that legacy systems like state bureaucracies, education, the technocratic state, they're just fundamentally breaking down.
Or worse, operating completely contrary to what they were built to do.
Right. And I think this is the crucial part. The focus of these materials isn't just on the collapse.
Right.
It's heavily focused on the response. How are everyday people reacting to this?
Yeah, whether that's building, alternative AI-powered ecosystems or retreating into ancient spiritual traditions.
Or just choosing radical local human connection over algorithm-driven hate.
Exactly. So as always, we are going to present the facts, the history, and the arguments exactly as they appear in the sources.
Some of this stuff pushes a lot of buttons.
It really does. Some
Yeah.
of the realities uncovered here are intense. We're just laying the evidence on the table for you to evaluate.
Let's get into it.
Let's do it. And the most visceral example of this institutional breakdown in our stack comes from the Restore Britain report.
Yeah, this was analyzed in detail by the commentator Asmongold.
Right. And this report outlines a nationwide crisis of grooming, trafficking, and abuse of young girls across the UK.
In towns like Rotherham, Telford, Rochdale.
Yeah. And the report explicitly details that these networks were predominantly run by Pakistani Muslim gangs.
And the scale here is, it's just difficult to process.
It is. The data says that if you extrapolate the findings nationally, they're looking at an estimated 250,000 victims.
250,000.
Yeah, 250,000 kids.
Right.
And the timeline stretches way further back than people realize.
Right. A lot of people think this is a recent thing.
Exactly. The report notes the acceleration happened heavily under Tony Blair's government, from 1997 onwards.
But the origins go back way further.
Yeah, Asmongold's source highlights the very first recorded case with this exact methodology happened in Bradford in 1955.
1955. That's wild. But the mechanism of the institutional betrayal is what really requires careful analysis here.
Right, because how does this happen for decades?
Well, the sources allege it wasn't just incompetence. It was a deliberate, systemic cover-up.
By the people supposed to stop it.
Exactly. Social services, local police, politicians. The documents detail specific bureaucratic maneuvers used to hide all this data.
They literally put kids in harm's way.
Yeah, according to the report, social care services would place vulnerable children directly into known trafficking hubs, but they disguise them as children's homes.
That is just sickening. And when the victims escape...
The authorities frequently return them right back to their abusers.
Wow. And the destruction of evidence, it wasn't even subtle.
No, not at all. The report details how they literally bought industrial shredders.
Specifically for the administrative units handling these abuse cases.
Right, just making sure the paper trails vanish before any external audits can happen.
So if you're listening to this and wondering, how hundreds of thousands of cases could be actively suppressed by the police, the sources point to a culture of active retaliation.
Yeah, against anyone who tried to sound the alarm. Whistleblowers were treated as the actual threat.
Right, like Maggie Oliver. She was a former detective constable in Greater Manchester.
And she tried to expose the profound failures of the police force.
And what happened? She was met with a wall of administrative silence and professional retaliation.
The sources say the authorities specifically instructed officers not to record the ethnicity of the perpetrators in their databases.
Which makes tracking the networks impossible.
Yeah.
And then there's Susan Hall, another whistleblower.
She brought her concerns forward and just got inundated with attacks.
The response from political leadership is what really gets me, specifically Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London.
Yeah, the source points out he dismissed the concerns by blaming the violence on county lines networks.
Can you clarify that term for the audience?
Sure, so county lines is UK law enforcement jargon. It refers to urban drug-dealing gangs that expand out into rural areas.
Right, and they often use kids as drug mules.
Exactly. So by blaming the violence on county lines operations, the leadership was trying to reframe a very specific, demographically organized trafficking crisis.
They tried to make it sound like just a generalized, raceless issue of urban drug crime.
Right. Khan even went as far as calling the whistleblowers malicious and politically motivated.
It's like the immune system of the society just started attacking itself.
Yeah. The sources point to two converging mechanisms for why this happened. First, a paralyzing fear within the civil service of being accused of racism. And second, a cynical reliance on specific demographic voting blocks to maintain political power.
Right. The report argues post-war political leaders embraced this model of multiculturalism that eventually just became immune to any criticism.
So to investigate these networks, to even record the demographics of the perpetrators, meant risking your career and being labeled far-right.
And for the Labour Party, the inquiry highlights that these demographic groups were just electorally vital in key swing seats.
The administrative state essentially prioritized abstract community relations over the physical safety of children.
It's like the immune system, the police, the press intentionally attacked the whistleblowers, treating them as the disease.
While letting the actual pathogen spread completely unchecked.
Which brings us to the political reality, right? How does the public respond to a crisis like this?
Well, political theory says there should be a massive, immediate electoral repudiation. They should vote these people out.
But the sources analyzing the recent Makerfield by-election in the UK show that this feedback loop is entirely broken.
Yeah, we're looking at commentary from Akkad Daly, Richard IV, and Connor Tomlinson here.
And despite the national anger over these exact grooming gang revelations, the Labour candidate, Andy Burnham, secured a massive 55% of the vote.
55%.
How does that happen?
The phenomenon at play is what political sociologists call ancestral voting.
Right. The Akkad Daily source points out that Makerfield has essentially voted for the Labour Party since 1906.
120 years as a Labour stronghold.
So for these voters, casting a ballot isn't about evaluating a track record. It's an inherited cultural identity.
It's literally like inheriting a regional football team from your dad.
Exactly. You don't abandon your team just because the manager's terrible or the players are failing.
Right. Your allegiance is tied to your sense of self and your community's industrial past.
And Burnham played this perfectly. The sources note he ran a hyper-localized campaign.
Yeah, he distanced himself from Keir Starmer and the national leadership.
He basically told the voters, I'm going to save the Labour Party from the path of destruction it's on.
Leaning right into that tribal loyalty. He gave them a way to vote for their ancestral identity without feeling complicit in the national failures.
Meanwhile, the attempts to disrupt this legacy voting system ran into a brick wall.
Yeah, Restore Britain stepped into the race. They formed just 4 months prior, specifically to address the institutional betrayal of the grooming gangs.
And they managed to secure roughly 7% of the vote.
Which analysts view in two very different ways.
Right. On one hand, 7% for a 4-month-old party means they kept their financial deposit and proved they could organize locally.
But on the other hand, it's a huge underperformance compared to their internal canvassing.
Yeah, they thought they had up to 24% of the constituency sympathetic to their message.
Connor Tomlinson makes a critical distinction here. He says sympathy expressed on a doorstep during a canvassing interview does not automatically equal a vote in the ballot box.
When you're standing in that booth, breaking a 120-year-old habit is incredibly difficult.
The gravitational pull is just too strong.
But that 7% still had massive ripple effects, right? It deeply unsettled Reform UK.
Oh, completely. Nigel Farage's party, Reform UK, basically stagnated in this by-election. They got the exact same vote share as before.
And Richard IV observes that Farage recognized a huge vulnerability here.
Yeah, if a brand new party can peel off 7% just by focusing intensely on the grooming gang cover-ups.
Then reform's mathematical path to ever forming a government is incredibly fragile.
So Farage panicked and immediately pivoted his strategy.
The sources say he launched a new Substack focused heavily on identitarian grievance messaging.
Targeting anti-white politics and anti-white institutions.
Right, a calculated attempt to stop the bleeding of his base and consolidate the fractured populist vote.
It's all just a scramble for a base that is fundamentally paralyzed.
Which raises a huge question. If an administrative state can oversee the abuse of 250,000 citizens, and the public still returns them to power because of a century-old habit.
The steering wheel is no longer connected to the tires.
Exactly. So to understand why a population gets this paralyzed, unable to process reality, we have to look at how their critical thinking is formed.
Right, because ancestral voting doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's the result of specific educational conditioning.
And this leads us to the sources provided on the Australian education system, specifically the work of Dr. Fiona Mueller and Professor Simon Haynes.
And the foundational data point they bring up is just staggering.
It really is. Based on OECD testing metrics, 44% of Australians are functionally illiterate.
44%.
Adults who lack the reading comprehension to process a complex text or navigate a modern workplace or even evaluate election claims.
And the crazy part is the country has doubled its educational expenditure per child over recent decades.
Pouring money into the system hasn't worked. Mueller and Haynes argue it's not a funding failure, it's a deliberate philosophical shift.
Right. Historically, education was rooted in humanitas, the classical liberal arts approach.
It was about inducting students into a civilizational conversation. Wisdom, context, inductive reasoning.
But starting heavily in the 1960s, universities and teaching colleges systematically replaced this with critical pedagogy.
Pioneered by Paulo Freire.
Exactly. And Freire's framework completely changes the purpose of the classroom. It views all of history through one specific lens.
Oppressor versus oppressed.
Right. Under critical pedagogy, education isn't about knowledge transmission anymore. It's about training activists to dismantle power structures.
So mechanically, how does that look in a classroom?
Well, take a standard history lesson. Under the old humanist model, if you study the colonization of Australia, you look at economic drivers, navigation tech, indigenous interactions, legal frameworks.
You learn to hold multiple complex truths at once.
But under critical pedagogy, the lesson is completely flattened. Historical figures are instantly categorized into fixed identities.
Moral guilt or moral victimhood.
Exactly. You don't learn how to analyze the event. You learn how to apply the oppressed binary to it.
There's a quote in the sources from sociologist Edward Shills that is just chilling.
Yeah, he notes that modern teachers genuinely believe they have a moral obligation to further the cause of revolution and destroy existing society.
They literally view themselves as activist facilitators, not literacy instructors.
Professor Haynes calls the result of this zombification.
Zombification, that's a strong word. It makes the university sound less like a navigation system teaching you to read a map.
And more like a software patch that intentionally overwrites your brain so you only see power dynamics.
When you strip away historical context in the great books, you don't liberate students, you regress them.
Into a tribal, pre-civilized state, they get entirely categorized by their intersectional identities, race, gender, class.
And they memorize grievances instead of synthesizing information.
And this deliberate erosion of literacy, this zombification, makes the population uniquely vulnerable to the next layer of institutional control.
The rise of the technocratic state and artificial intelligence?
Exactly. The discussion from the New Polity source connects this educational decline directly to the modern digital environment.
Because when people can't read deeply or think critically, they become incredibly susceptible to a controlled information matrix.
And to understand why AI is such a profound shift, the source relies heavily on F.A. Hayek.
The Economist.
Yeah, and his concept of the knowledge problem. Back in the early 20th century, Hayek was arguing against central planning.
Right, the idea that the government can manage the entire economy.
He argued that human society is just infinitely complex. No single human mind, no committee can process all the localized variables, desires, and competing values.
Right. Central planning fails because it can't solve that massive calculation problem.
Historically, if you wanted to maintain a totalitarian state, you needed massive bureaucracies, secret police, brute force. It was inefficient.
But the new polity source argues that AI fundamentally upends Hayek's calculation problem.
Exactly. AI, specifically these massive neural networks, actually possesses the computational power to process millions of variables in real time.
It can collect data through algorithmic surveillance, categorize behavior, and orchestrate social rules without a visible bureaucracy.
AI solves the critical mass problem of politics.
So a tiny handful of technocrats could conceivably manage millions of people seamlessly.
Adjusting the algorithmic parameters so smoothly, the public never even realizes they're being steered.
The new polity discussion gives a fascinating real-world example of this in action: the sudden disappearance of the climate change emergency narrative.
Oh, this is a brilliant point. For the last decade, climate change was the absolute existential crisis.
Universities, the UN, corporate media, it was everywhere, and then just quietly vanished from the top-tier agenda.
And the sources argue this happened because the exact same tech conglomerates controlling the algorithms are currently in a massive arms race.
To build AI data centers.
Right. And those data centers require staggering amounts of electrical energy.
So the environmental narrative suddenly became highly inconvenient for the technocrats.
And the algorithms simply memory hold the crisis, shifting public attention elsewhere.
That perfectly demonstrates the power to dictate reality for a population that has lost its functional literacy.
But, and this is where it gets hopeful, the sources also highlight a fascinating counter-trend.
Yeah, Rick Beto's analysis, he says there's a visceral, organic rebellion brewing among the youth.
Right, teenagers and college students are actively rejecting artificial intelligence.
They aren't just annoyed by the low-quality AI slop videos on their feeds. They feel a deep, intuitive revulsion toward it.
Whenever they recognize the AI aesthetic, they immediately disengage. They hate the synthetic nature of it.
And Beto expands on this by questioning the narrative around these massive data centers.
Yeah, he points out the tech is already moving toward decentralization. Companies are building processors that can run large language models directly on consumer devices.
Like completely disconnected from the cloud.
Exactly. If consumers can run what they need locally on a laptop, and the youth hate the centralized AI content.
What is the true purpose of these football field-sized data centers eating up city-level power grids?
The implication is that their primary function isn't consumer convenience. It's mass surveillance, behavioral training, and centralized control.
Which leaves us with a profound tension here. You have a youth demographic that intuitively hates the AI matrix.
But they're simultaneously suffering from a 44% functional illiteracy rate.
Right. They've been zombified by critical pedagogy. So how do they fight back against a hyper-complex system when their schools withheld the intellectual tools to understand it?
The sources argue you can't fight a seamless tech system using the captured legacy institutions. You have to build entirely new parallel structures.
And the strategy for this rebellion is outlined in the Basecamp Playbook by Simone and Malcolm Collins.
Their whole thesis is built on the realization that institutional capture is terminal.
You can't just subvert a university or a media corporation from the inside once the operating system is rewritten by critical pedagogy.
Complaining about woke media or organizing boycotts is a waste of energy. It still relies on the old systems.
The Collinses argue the only viable path is to build counter-institutions that are strictly better than what they're replacing.
And the irony is incredible here. While centralized AI is the ultimate tool for technocratic control,
Grassroots, decentralized AI is becoming the primary weapon for the cultural rebellion.
historically, legacy gatekeepers, Hollywood, publishers, academia kept power because they controlled the immensely expensive means of production.
They decided who got funding and who reached an audience.
But localized AI completely bypasses them.
The Basecamp source talks about the Skybrow cinematic universe and the explosion of AI-generated anime.
Independent creators are operating totally outside the studio system, producing music, literature, indie video games.
And they visually and narratively rival the legacy giants. They're establishing their own microeconomies.
The tactic here is critical. You don't wait for the bureaucratic giants to collapse.
Malcolm Collins makes a specific point about the tone of this, too. He warns against adopting the moralizing, preachy tactics of the captured institutions.
Right. You don't look at a consumer and say, if you buy a ticket to that Hollywood movie, you're a bad person supporting a corrupt system.
Guilt-driven activism is exactly what the public is exhausted by.
Instead, you rely on aggressive, relentless competence. Build a better indie film, code a better game, run a more rigorous homeschool co-op.
Let the superiority of the product speak for itself. You drain the legacy institutions of their relevance by just outcompeting them.
It's an incredibly pragmatic approach.
Yeah.
But there is a fundamental critique of this digital counter-ecosystem in the SAC.
Yeah, if your entire strategy relies on generating synthetic media using the exact same underlying tech the technocrats are building.
Are you just building a shinier, more customized cage?
Right. If the counterculture is still digitally mediated, you're still on a board where the rules are dictated by algorithms.
And that realization is driving a completely different, way more radical response.
People who are choosing to log off entirely.
Yeah, turning their backs on modern politics and tech altogether.
Seeking an anchor in ancient, rigid spiritual traditions. And the insights from Father Hans Jacobs in our sources give a fascinating look at this.
He works extensively with young men who are broken, isolated, and deeply resentful of the modern world.
When they come to him, their first instinct is to fight the perceived evil through online culture wars. They want to be digital crusaders.
But Father Jacobs deliberately short-circuits that instinct. He operates on the principle that religion is the ground of culture.
Culture shapes politics, so if you're obsessing over digital debates, you're fighting downstream from the actual problem.
The orthodox cure he prescribes is aggressively internalized. He tells them to stop focusing on external political enemies. Log off.
Turn your attention entirely inward toward Christ. He demands they deal with their own resentment and isolation.
And hardest of all, actively forgive the specific individuals who have wounded them in the real world.
It's a profound shift from externalized grievance to internalized accountability.
And this search for an unyielding foundation brings us to a really deep theological debate documented in the sources.
Between Dr. Gavin Ortlund, representing Protestant evangelicalism, and Father Peter Heers, representing Eastern Orthodoxy.
This debate gets to the very core of what an institution actually is and what people are looking for when they want spiritual bedrock.
Let's start with Dr. Ortlund. He views the church through a more decentralized, modern lens.
He sees it as an invisible, universal collection of true believers, scattered across thousands of fragmented denominations.
Ortlund argues that restricting the true church to a single, historically continuous, visible institution is un-Catholic in the universal sense.
And his primary evidence is empirical. He looks at the fruits, good works, transformations, miracles happening across all these groups.
And concludes that since the Holy Spirit is clearly working everywhere, the church itself must be everywhere.
But Father Peter Heers vehemently rejects this fragmented, invisible ecclesiology.
Drawing on ancient patristic teachings.
Right. Heers argues the Orthodox Church isn't merely a human institution that can be divided by disagreements.
He defines it as a visible, divine human organism. The literal, unbroken continuation of the incarnation of Christ in physical space.
So from the strict Orthodox perspective, the idea that the body of Christ could be fragmented into thousands of competing denominations is fundamentally heretical.
Because Christ himself cannot be divided.
But Heers still has to answer Ortlund's empirical point. If the Orthodox Church is the only visible boundary, how do you explain miracles happening outside of it?
And to answer this, Heers relies on a highly nuanced distinction in Eastern theology, the difference between God's essence and God's energies.
Formalized by Gregory Palamas during the Hesychast controversies in the 14th century, it completely rewires how Eastern Christianity views the universe.
This is honestly one of the most profound concepts in the stack today. To understand essence versus energies, think of the sun.
The actual star in our solar system.
Right. The essence of the sun is that massive, incomprehensible nuclear furnace at its core. You can't touch it. If you did, you'd be annihilated.
Right, it's just totally unapproachable.
But the energies of the sun are the rays of light and the warmth radiating outward. They blanket the earth, give life to plants, warm your skin.
You're experiencing the reality of the sun, but interacting with its energies, not its unapproachable essence.
Exactly. And applying this to theology, Heers explains that God's energies, his actions and presence in the universe are multifaceted.
There are creative, sustaining, providential energies upholding the entire cosmos.
Every single human being, regardless of religion, participates in these providential energies simply by drawing breath.
And because these sustaining energies are everywhere, miracles and profound acts of goodness can and do occur completely outside the formal, visible boundaries of the Orthodox Church.
Heers uses a specific biblical example for this from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9.
Yeah, the disciples see a man casting out demons in the name of Jesus, and they try to stop him because he isn't part of their group.
And Jesus tells them, forbid him not. Ortland uses this passage to say, look, the church is bigger than your specific visible group.
And Von Heers brings in the commentary of the ancient church fathers, specifically Blessed Theophylact.
Who interprets this completely differently.
Yeah, Theophylact argues the man casting out demons was actually vainglorious. He wasn't living the austere, rigorous life of a true disciple.
He just discovered the name of Jesus had immense power and used it to work miracles for his own personal fame.
The fathers argue that just because God allows his providential grace to act doesn't mean the person is integrated into the actual body of Christ.
The providential energies are universal, but the specific, purifying, deifying grace, the grace that actually transforms the soul into the likeness of God.
A process known as theosis.
Right. That grace is administered exclusively within the strict, visible boundaries of the church through its physical sacraments. Baptism, chrismation, the Eucharist.
It's an ontological claim about where the actual medicine of immortality is administered.
And the prescription for this medicine, as detailed in the source text Holy Resurrection, is utterly brutal to the modern, hyper-individualized ego.
The text outlines the path of stillness, and it challenges literally every assumption of modern digital activism.
It argues the ultimate goal of a human life is not to build a massive following or loudly convert nations or engage in constant political warfare.
The goal is profound inner stillness. It's a radical inversion of modern values.
It states it is spiritually superior to free yourself from the internal bonds of sin than to free physical slaves from bondage.
It demands you learn to endure humiliation without answering back or defending yourself.
It explicitly warns that many people who perform mighty works and preach to thousands end up destroying their own souls.
Because they launch themselves into the chaotic world to save others, while their own internal architecture was completely diseased.
And the pinnacle of this philosophy is the concept that mercy overcomes justice.
The text argues a truly merciful person doesn't just hand out charity out of duty.
They gladly suffer injustice. They willingly allow themselves to be wronged without seeking legal or social retribution.
And actively have mercy on the people abusing them.
This is the absolute antithesis of the outrage-driven critical pedagogy that teaches students to hyperanalyze every microaggression and demand systemic justice.
It creates an unbelievable cultural whiplash.
Seriously, we live in an era of maximum frictionless customization. You customize your media feed, generate bespoke AI entertainment, customize your own personal truth.
Yet the sources show a distinct migration of young people voluntarily flocking to an ancient 2,000-year-old faith.
One that demands absolute submission, intense fasting, bodily labor, and absolute silence.
Because when the entire modern world feels like shifting liquid sand, humans naturally seek the heaviest, most immovable bedrock they can find.
The rigorous, unyielding history of a tradition like Orthodoxy provides a psychological structure the customized, algorithm-driven world just can't offer.
It's a rebellion achieved entirely through submission to an ancient boundary.
But, maybe retreating to a monastery or adopting rigid ancient theology isn't the only way to find bedrock.
Right, you don't have to become a monk.
The sources suggest you can also find a profound anchor right in the public square.
By choosing radical, localized human connection over algorithmic division.
We see a beautiful example of this in the TLC livestream source. This is a digital space that completely defies the financial and psychological logic of the internet.
It's a livestream panel featuring an incredibly diverse group. Orthodox Jews, Eastern Orthodox Christians, Roman Catholics, Protestants, and Unitarians.
Dr. Gavin Ortland actually drops into this exact panel frequently.
And the dynamic here is sociologically fascinating. They do not do polite, superficial ecumenism.
No, they discuss the most deeply contentious, historically bloody, relationship-ending topics imaginable.
Geopolitics, Zionism, the fundamental nature of the Trinity.
In one exchange, an Orthodox Jewish host explicitly tells a Protestant panelist that penal substitutionary atonement is one of the greatest blasphemies he's ever encountered.
Let's clarify that theological term for context.
Right. Penal substitutionary atonement is the specific doctrine that Jesus took upon himself the exact, legal, wrathful punishment from God the Father that human sinners deserved to satisfy divine justice.
And the Jewish host views this concept, a father punishing a son to satisfy a legal debt, as blasphemous to the nature of God.
These aren't minor academic disagreements over, tax policy. These are fundamental clashes about the nature of the universe and salvation.
And yet, Despite these existential disagreements, the participants remain incredibly close friends.
The sources note they regularly visit each other's homes. Some who met debating fiercely on the channel actually became real-life roommates in Los Angeles.
To understand how that's possible, you have to look at the ethos of the group. One participant summarized it as trampling down the algorithm by the algorithm.
They are deliberately using the internet against its own underlying programming.
Social media algorithms are designed to maximize engagement by monetizing outrage.
The system wants them to tear each other down, clip the angriest 10 seconds out of context, and retreat to ideological silos so followers can generate ad revenue through angry comments.
But the panelists just refuse to play the game. Ortland asks during the stream, how do you humanize someone whose ideas you believe are fundamentally destructive?
The answer is profound in its simplicity. You keep talking. You talk it through, for heaven's sake.
You prioritize maintaining faith in the human relationship over achieving victory for your ideology.
The Orthodox Jewish host contextualizes this with the ancient Jewish tradition of the schools of Hillel and Shammai.
In first-century Judaism, these two rabbinic schools disagreed fiercely on almost every interpretation of the law. Massive, complex debates.
Yet they maintained such deep mutual respect for each other's humanity that the students of the opposing schools frequently intermarried.
The TLC livestream group is operating on that exact principle. They prioritize the person sitting across from them as an image bearer of God above the specific idea that person holds.
They recognize the internet is fundamentally degrading human psychology, and their chosen defense mechanism is stubborn, resilient, face-to-face friendship.
It poses such a powerful question for us today.
In a digital environment built and funded by technocrats to divide us into warring identity factions, treating someone you fiercely disagree with as a complex human being might be the ultimate act of modern rebellion.
Friendship requires you to step outside the assumptions of the algorithm and engage with the infinite, frustrating complexity of a real person.
So to bring it all together, the sources we've examined today present a cohesive narrative of a society in transition.
We've seen the devastating consequences of relying on legacy systems, like the UK's systemic cover-up of grooming gangs to protect political optics.
We've traced the root of public paralysis to the deliberate zombification of the educational system through critical pedagogy,
Leaving populations completely vulnerable to the seamless control of AI technocracy.
But the documents also highlight the profound resilience of the human spirit, builders creating decentralized, strictly better counter-ecosystems,
Individuals seeking immovable bedrock in ancient spiritual traditions.
and people forging defiant, algorithm-breaking friendships across massive ideological divides.
The overarching lesson here is that the navigational instruments of the past can no longer be trusted to guide you.
You have to take active, deliberate responsibility for your own mind, your own community, and your own foundations.
So as we do at the end of every show, here are 3 practical, actionable steps for you to take in response to the realities we've uncovered today.
Number 1, audit your institutional reliance. Take a hard, objective look at your life. Identify one area where you are trusting a legacy system that has clearly stopped serving your best interests.
Whether it's a political party you vote for due to ancestral habit, a school philosophy, or a news feed you passively consume.
Identify it and begin the difficult process of building or finding an alternative.
Number 2, build a counter habit. Centralized algorithms feed you digital outrage and synthetic slop. Actively reject the programming.
Step away from the screens today and engage with something grounded and ancient. Read a challenging classical book, practice inner stillness, or learn a foundational physical skill.
Anchor your mind in physical reality, making it immune to algorithmic manipulation.
And number 3, cross the divide. Reach out to someone in your physical life with whom you fundamentally disagree on a core, heated issue.
Have a conversation where your only goal is to maintain the relationship. Do not try to convert them or win the argument.
Look at them strictly as a human being, an image bearer, and talk to them for heaven's sake. And remember, if we didn't explicitly quote a specific detail from a source today, all of these transcripts from the bureaucratic breakdowns to the intricate theological debates are vital reading.
We highly encourage you to dive into the raw sources yourselves to go even deeper into the mechanics of these topics.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to consider. We began by discussing the failure of navigational instruments on a ship.
Right. And if the technocratic age has successfully eliminated all the geographic and informational borders between us, exposing our minds to a chaotic, infinite sea of data and outrage.
What if the only way to save our sanity and our societies is to voluntarily build our own strict, uncrossable boundaries around our minds and our local communities?
A ship without a reinforced hull isn't free to explore the ocean. It just takes on water and sinks.
Let us know what you think. Hit the comments and tell us. Where are you encountering these themes of institutional betrayal in your daily life, and how are you building your own counter-institutions to survive it?
Please like, subscribe, and share this deep dive with someone who needs to hear it.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.